It's now 25 minutes to 8 o'clock. In case you're joining us now, this is the newsroom on Morning Express. And shortly, we're going to be listening to one of, a journalist who is based in a county. And I'll be giving you details of that. But before we get to that, Victor Bwire, we talked about history. And, Gathara and Juma have basically mentioned some of the gaps that we possibly are seeing. And it might be important for Kenyans to understand where we are coming from in terms of devolution, for us to actually now fully understand where we are and what it's supposed to deliver for us.
Thank you. I see the struggle around the history of devolution, and that's one of the things. Actually, I was citing an article I wrote for Nation on the same. One, that decentralization, attempts at decentralization have not started now, like you have said. If you look at our sessional paper number 10, there were attempts to start laying ground for a decentralized way of doing things. And if you remember after the sessional paper, you look at what Nyachai was doing on the district focus for rural development is largely based around that. And at that time, what they were thinking about, and what now, like my colleagues say, was a deficiency was the resources. That yes, we have developed, we have districts, we have divisions and what, but when resources are still centralized, what these districts and whatever help us. So the push was then, like rightly they say, is how do we decentralize resources so that then it can, as it were, bring resources to people, or closer to people. So that is, largely the history of decentralization in Kenya. Largely the session on paper number 10 mentions it, lays framework. And if you look at even how, when Anyang' Nyong'o is the Minister for Planning in the first Grand Coalition, they start that sessional paper, the cabinet paper approval around the issue of decentralization, and eventually with other players, we have it. But have we, like you said, the debate, have we looked at the history, the lessons learned? What were the gaps when we tried, and what were we, feeling or fulfilling when we were pushing for decentralization of resources? And that's why the gap is that more of us, the journalists, we are stuck in the politics of devolution, not the devolution itself, what it meant to do, where are the gaps, and what ought to be. So that, like Gathara said, much of our concentration is on the national government. We are still stuck with the national government. And nobody, rarely do we ask those devolved functions, the governors, in terms of resources, what are they doing? And the governors that have been mentioned many times are those governors who still occupy the former provinces that were prominent, the Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, and Nairobi, So that rarely do people talk about, you ask a governor, sometimes you ask a governor of Wajir, nobody knows even. Sometimes people struggle to even remember who they are. And so you see that. And that is replicated in our newsrooms. That's one of the major problems. Because when I call standard, I'm given a provincial news editor. Yet we did away with provinces. We still have provincial news editors in our newsroom, not just standard and others. I'm just giving example because I'm here. But you still have those provinces, even their thinking. We have not even moved. And you have seen even many articles when we release a report some 3 years ago on media and devolution, people are still stuck with Nyanza province, with Western province, when those things were done away with. So you already see a struggle even within our media houses. Even
now, when we look at the politics, you'll hear there's
still
Nyanza
stuck. Yes, the Mount Kenya things. We are still stuck. So we have not devolved, media ourselves, to start looking.
To start looking at it.
Like Nani said, Kwayera said, too many of these decentralized newspapers, but most of them are stuck with national politics. So you see a Turkana Times newspaper publication that is still stuck with the absence of Joho in Mombasa. And then you are wondering, where are your priorities? Much as they will want to know, but is that your priority?
All right.
So those are challenges that we need to look at. Then the other thing also, obviously, Parliament for the first time are now at the county level. Parliament was national, and many of our Kwayeras were reporting Parliament from Nairobi. Now, our colleagues at the county levels, even dressing, like the other time, Paranya was chasing some of them from Parliament, simply because they can't. So we need also to empower journalists at that level, to interrogate, to deal with legislative matters at those counties, not just walking around governors and the rest. There are serious issues that journalists need to.
All right, and I want us to also look, the devolution conference is coming soon, and I'd like us to look into what should we be looking at, even as we go, because it's going to be covered by, I'm sure, most, if not all, media houses, and what we should really be looking for, apart from the color, that this governor came and that governor came, and what they said, because sometimes we get stuck on that, and we forget to ask the critical questions. But before we do that, I want us to hear from another journalist, and he's a former news editor, David Ohito. He is currently the Chief of Staff in Mandera County. He spoke to us earlier on from Mandera.
Challenge with coverage of counties in Kenya is that we have media which is national and has never retooled itself to accept that there has been devolution since 2013. So what remains of the national media is media headquartered in Nairobi, and then they have a few satellite offices, up to 5, 6, 7 of them sometimes, across key counties that follow the main railway line between Mombasa and Malaba. Outside that, the counties that are in the northern Kenya, or parts which were called marginalized parts of the country, have received unfair, biased coverage all over time, and no single newsroom has invested enough in detailing resources or even personnel to some of these areas. I'll mention today, without fear of favor, that today if you took 100% of editors in Kenya and drew the map of Kenya and asked them to show you where Lodwar is, where Moyale is, where Mandera town is, where Garissa is, 90% of them would fail that basic test. We have very limited knowledge as editors and reporters to cover effectively aspects of devolution. What we have seen, however, have been snippets of coverages of some of these areas. But we must accept also that there has been the challenge of infrastructure. It takes about 2 hours to fly between Nairobi and Mandera town, for example, and one-way air ticket is 16,500 shillings. So very few media houses are capable of investing in money to have an area like Mandera covered on a regular basis. However, there have been some good efforts made by individual media houses who have sent crews to cover what I would call award-winning pieces of journalism to these areas. But by and large, the marginalized countries have been marginalized up to today. And no single media house has better interest in terms of news coverage, in terms of public interest to cover, say, Samburu, Tana River, Wajir, Mandera, Turkana, or Marsabit, unless there is money tied to it, and this money is from the advertisement. There's no single CEO of a media house I have seen traveling to see where is Mandera, where is Marsabit, where is Turkana, where is Tana River, where is Samburu. The day you start seeing the CEOs of media houses visiting these satellite marginalized counties, then I think that is when we'll start having a different approach to the coverage of all these counties. But also, part of the problem is that the way the media is structured in Kenya is that these areas either receive newspapers too late, sometimes 2 days or 3 days later after they have been published. We are lucky in Mandera, there's a daily flight now. We receive copies of newspapers from around 11 or midday. We get a copy of the Standard, we get a copy of the Nation, the Star, on a daily basis. But again, they are just snippets. It's very difficult to get a headline from Mandera unless it is a negative story of terror, of teachers who are escaping these areas. But that does not mean that there has been good effort in terms of development projects being carried out in these areas. I must say, governors, especially Roba, who is doing his second term, has done an excellent job. An area that had never seen a tarmac road since independence, so the first tarmac road of 24 kilometers within the town. Areas that there were no phone coverage. Today, there are mobile service telephone providers giving us support all through. And we have seen unprecedented high number of visitors, from among them envoys visiting some of these regions. All these are credit to devolution. So how then can you tell the story of the marginalized counties? I think there must be deliberate effort by media houses to try and invest and partner with counties so that these areas are covered. I have received dozens of calls and newspaper proposals to cover us just because devolution conference is coming next week in Kakamega. But I'm saying Mandera County is ready to spend up to 10-20 million shillings on a media house that will partner with it going forward to make sure that its story is heard, coverage is fair, balanced and objective, and that it is not about negative stories only.
All right, Gathara, your thoughts on that? I can see there are some things. I don't know whether you are agreeing or disagreeing with Ohito.
Well, first, you've got to remember that Ohito is no longer a journalist. He is working in the county government as a public official. So you've got to take a little bit of what he says with a pinch of salt. I think he makes some good points about the fact that, and that has been articulated here as well, that our national media is not...
There's no present,
at least in any significant way, in especially the outlying counties. But still, I mean, we've got to ask about the role of government in all of this. When we talk of media, we really tend to focus on private media, but we do have a public media house that is funded lots of times. I mean, it's funded by our taxes, people from all counties, and they do deserve to be covered by it. And secondly, we've got to ask what county governments are doing to actually encourage the emergence of locally based, of county-based media. You hear in the clip that Ohito is talking about partnering with national media. We want our story to be heard. Heard by whom? He's talking about people in Nairobi, not his own citizens in Mandera. And it should really, and I think this is, again, another thing that we need to think about when we talk about devolution and the media. There's a conversation to be had about the role of government in media. When we formed our constitution in 2010, we really saw government as the enemy, so basically stay away from media, don't be involved. But I think we need to start thinking about how, since we finance government, how we can give it a duty, to further the emergence of media that actually reports the issues of people, that create spaces for people to discuss. So I think county media, county governments, should really be tasked with creating both an environment for private media within their area to come up, but also to provide basic public service media house or broadcasting that allows people to discuss the issues, so that their audience for county governments shouldn't be the national press. Should actually be a press corps that is based within their county. And
understands the issues of the local mwananchi. Now, Ohito, not Ohito, Bwire, I'm still on Ohito. Victor,
okay.
Victor, one of the challenges that, of course, is coming up is the lack of resources to fly to or to go to some of those counties. There's also the question of access. And when we talk about their stories being told, who best would tell the story? Do we fly in journalists from Nairobi to go and cover those stories? Are those the best journalists? Or do we have journalists who should be based in those counties that are able to articulate those issues? Because those are their day-to-day issues.
Thank you. One of the things I've always been against is this parachute journalism. Of parachuting journalists to go areas they have little information or knowledge. It tends to kill local journalism. It tends to subjugate and make the local correspondents feel inferior.
Right.
Yet most of them are equally qualified. But moving away from that, we have just done a study with the Hardy on media coverage of devolution, which we are supposed to be releasing very soon. And some of these things change. One of the things I hear David Ohito mentioning is that approach that is killing media reportage of devolution. Because what has happened is that once media houses, the CEOs visit those counties and write memorandums of understanding with media houses on how to cover them and how they will give them some advertising money, then they have killed the coverage of devolution.
And what you'll get is very positive stories from those areas, because of course they're paying.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and why it should be that it's the national media that's doing this and not a county-based.
Two, most of our correspondents, and I've had this discussion with many of our colleague editors, even from the county I come from, is that most of the journalists or correspondents are embedded, are an extension of the county governments. So you will find most of our correspondents are either advisors or media advanced team for governors or MCAs, and for that matter, they are stuck with MCAs and governors. Yet we have very competent CECs and CEOs who have been employed by those governors, who can talk, who understand matters, policy, technical issues. But we rarely, in fact, I've challenged a few governors, a few counties right now, why can't we invest in training CECs, CEOs on media relations, so that CECs in charge of infrastructure and can talk about it. It shouldn't be the governor talking about it. Right. So how do we empower these professionals? It must be an investment that we must make as an industry. Two, the issue of access, like you say. Who accesses? When the study we were doing says most of the people who give information on county governments is either a teacher at the national level saying how much money has given them, or we rarely, who asks? Currently, government has only given recurrent expenditure to most of the government agencies because of obvious reasons. Who is asking this government how much do they generate locally, and how are they utilizing these resources? We need to see who is, for example, as a media, who is focusing on devolved functions. You know, we are stuck with sometimes national, those functions that are still not yet. You ask a governor, you hear a governor saying he will sack nurses. How do you sack people who are secondary to you, you have not employed? So you see that little bit of confusion among our journalists. I say, when a governor says, I'll sack all of them, why can't you ask him, but how will you sack people who have not employed?
Could there be a lack of understanding of what devolution really is?
That's what I'm saying. We were stuck with the politics of devolution. Right. We have not moved to start talking about the devolution, the process itself, what it meant to be, what are the gaps, how does it help? And this can be largely be packaged if media houses invest in also training our journalists. I mean, devolution is a new thing. How many times has Standard Group trained its journalists on devolution? The process just brought a governance expert at devolution to the newsroom to help the people understand. And I mean, we tried a project with Pond and a few people to just in a pilot project in Kakamega, in Nyeri, just to help them. And you see, even things like standing order, those basic small things. So how do we help? Those counties are passing very low, some of them very good, some of them very weird. But nobody is looking at them and helping. What is the implication? Some of them are even contrary to national laws, which is again against even our own country. But so we need to move away from this politics of devolution to devolution itself and the process and what it meant and what are the gaps.
All right, Kwayera, we have the devolution conference coming up, and we know we are going to have a battery of journalists going in to cover the devolution conference. But what are some of those critical questions that we need to ask during that conference? Because one of the advantages that we'll have is you have all the majority, maybe all the county governments in one place. That would be a good place for us to start in having this conversation.
I would summarize actually what you're saying in about your question about one sentence, but I'll explain. We are stuck with the devolution politics because of lack of understanding or having no knowledge about what were the expectations of devolution of specific counties and what are the outcomes. Because the different counties have different, endowed differently. So the expectations and outcomes are also very different. But what we do in this kind of conference, like what I saw in the first national conference in Kwale, the second one was in Kisumu, the third one was in Nakuru. The fourth one was wherever. This is the fifth. We are still, if you look at the agenda of those, the objectives of those conferences, they remain virtually the same. They have not changed a bit. That means there's been very little progress from the time that we adopted devolution up to the time we are having the fifth conference in Kakamega. So I would want questions that will want to resolve the mystery about what were the expectations of devolution and what are the outcomes. Unless we have those specific questions about the expectations and outcomes, we shall still be stuck with the, it shall still go round and round in circles without knowing what we're discussing. Yeah.
All right. COG, I was just thinking, and I've talked, to Andrew. or the media houses. Why can't we, for example, invest jointly as media houses before we send that battery of journalists to Kakamega for a quick 2-hour session with devolution experts, just to help the journalists who will be going there? And this can be done in a boardroom, just a media house, to help people who will go to report that conference. What are the key things?
Full understanding of what
I mean, so that it's not a routine thing that, yes, there's a governor's conference, we are going, there will be election. So that there's also value in sending the journalists we are saying there. What is it, other than just showing the color like you are mentioning? So we need to invest.
And I think
I'll need you to include your closing comments because we are out of time.
Right, and I think we need to distinguish between covering governors and covering devolution. You know, don't think that because you go to Kakamega and you speak to a few governors or they're all there and stuff that you're then covering devolution. Devolution is actually happening in the counties, you know. And that's why you need to be. And it doesn't happen at the conference. It happens every day. That's why I'm saying that we need to really focus on this everyday reporting from counties and to understand who are the audiences they're targeting. If for as long as we're still having the national media being tasked with reporting county events, they will always bring a national perspective from there, not a local one. And that means that those discussions that are necessary within counties to hold county governments to account, to insist on relevant policies to solve local problems will not be had. They will always be overwhelmed by what is national. So it's very important that we start a discussion about how we grow media within counties and how we ensure it is independent. What is the role of county governments in ensuring that independent public media can come up within their counties,
county level.
Yeah, so that it can allow for those local conversations to happen.
Okay, Kwayera, your closing comments.
I'll be very brief. Traditionally, we have the coverage of this kind of a significant event has always been done around the national politics. Take, for example, we have already seen coverage around the 4 pillars of development for the president's second term in power. I would want to see a situation where we are going to interrogate a question like, has there been redistribution of executive power? And executive power, I don't just the political power. We're talking about resources. We're talking about even knowledge. Has there been a distribution of at the county level? You know, distribution of let's say wealth. Have the rich transferred some of what they own? Or are they sharing? Not really transferring. Are they sharing with the people that they work for? Because that is actually what is supposed to be happening. Then, very critical, participation. Well, I was actually envisaged in the devolution. How many local people are participating in decision making at that level?
At the local level.
Yes.
All right. Bwire, your closing
the
comments.
County Government Act of 2012, actually Section 17, obligates county governments to work with the media. It's not even a favor. It's not about a CEO memorandum but it says county governments should deliberately use media in all its formats to enhance public participation, to enhance accountability, transparency, so that people know what they are doing. So county governments should, by law, be investing in how to deal with the media. It's not a favor they are doing to media to increase public participation, including what Gathara is saying. How do we empower local-based media houses so that they do the work they ought to do?
Right.
2, media houses must invest. And this investing, I mean, we should employ, pay well our local correspondents, who then should be moved out of their counties. Because while those people are working in their county, they have become extension of governors, and so they are not reporting anything for you. They are just doing PR things for that matter. 3, rotational. How do we have permanent segments in our TV station, radio stations, newspapers on devolution, the process, not the politics, so that we continuously, 47 counties, those are 47 episodes, already almost a year. So why can't we invest in that so that then we are talking about both positive and negative? Because we are not just talking about if Mandera has done well or Makueni has done well on universal health, what are the lessons other counties are learning from? So that was media. We're also helping to bridge the gap. That what is doing well in Busia can be done well those are the lessons learned. And media, as a platform, can provide that. But if we are not doing that, I was just checking. The other day, the president was opening the border post, and they were signing. But has Busia as a county done anything in infrastructure to support what the presidents were signing? I mean, that's not there. So again, how do we as media put a spotlight both, I mean, as watchdog, to show what local, the local counties are doing in tandem with at the national aspiration. What is happening? The big four agenda. The president can't not realize those things if at county level there's no support, there's no concurrency in terms of their approach, the budgeting process, the whatever.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. That's Victor Bwire, Programs Manager, Media Council of Kenya. We have Juma Kwayera, who's the Kenya Union of Journalists Chair.